Hello, hello. Good morning. Welcome to the kickoff for the 2021 Global Vision Week here at Grandview. My name is Casey Hill, and I'm the Viking Council President for the 2021-2022 school year. I'm honored to be giving the introduction for the Global Vision Week today. Global Vision Week is designed to help Grandview University students, faculty, and staff engage in other lifestyles, beliefs, and cultures that differ from our own. It brings attention to individuals' differences on campus and educates us. The theme this year is identity and belonging in a digital world. I love this theme as it brings an emphasis to how our personal and cultural identities are constantly evolving and adapting with our connected world. With the ever-increasing use of technology our current world has, it has had a significant impact in this last year, as this is how the world connected due to the COVID-19 virus. While being socially isolated from those around us, we relied on our digital relationship to connect with others. I believe that showed how powerful technology can be. After this week, I hope that that each and every one of us can look at the world with a different lens, and I envision that we can better understand not only those around us, but ourselves as well. Global Vision Week holds so many great opportunities for those at Grandview. I encourage you to take advantage of these and attend the presentations and panels throughout the week. After a long year of being on Zoom University, I hope you branch out and get involved with others on campus. Continue to keep an open mind and be a community that cares for others. Today, we have a great opportunity. We will be hearing from Ms. Crystal Washington. She is the keynote speaker for this year's Albert Ravenholt Visiting Scholar Address, and she will educate us on the future of identity and a changing digital landscape. We will hear about the roles of power in personal and cultural identities as they are ever shifting in our increasingly connected world. You will hear a high-energy talk from Ms. Washington, and she will demonstrate how you can leverage identity and technology for the betterment of yourself and humanity. She will help us to uncover the way technology has changed humans, as well as the role social media has in shifting global society, cultures, and our behaviors. Ms. Washington will help us discover what we can do to better our society. We look forward to hearing Ms. Washington's keynote address regarding technology's influence on today's world. And with great honor, I welcome Ms. Crystal Washington to our campus.
Oh. Oh. Was that not the introduction?
No, that wasn't.
Oh, I was confused. I was like, oh, I'll see y'all in a moment.
Not quite yet. Good morning. Pastor Russ Lackey was not able to join us today, and so I'm Bill Burma, Vice President for Advancement, and I ask you to please join me in a word of prayer. Holy and gracious Lord, you created humanity to be in relationship with you and each other, which means you made us to have connected lives that help each other thrive. We marvel at the ways in which connections offer possibility, and possibility leads to opportunity, and opportunity to transformation. We also pause knowing that connections can be shallow and filled with anxiety because too often we only present carefully manicured selves instead of our whole selves. Help us to harness the best of technology in order to empower lives that strive for the common good. Inspire us through the words of today's speaker, Crystal Washington. Help us as we walk together, pray together, and live together, both on and offline, so that all may flourish. Amen.
Amen.
President Henning.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for those who are here. Thank you for those who are watching the stream online. It's my pleasure to welcome the faculty, staff, and students of Grandview University to this Global Vision Week keynote address. And a warm welcome to our distinguished speaker, Crystal Washington. Noted expert, author, and technology strategist, we're honored by your presence. I also want to recognize and thank the Global Vision Week Steering Committee for organizing our week's activities, and a special thank you to Professor Heather Brady for her energy and leadership of this enterprise. Now in its 11th year, Global Vision Week has become a time for us to take pause at Grandview and pay attention to the countless ways that we are connected to those around us in Des Moines, across Iowa, throughout the United States, and indeed around the world. This keynote address has emerged as an opportunity for us to learn from a person who has lived a life of impact through service. Crystal Washington is Grandview's 8th Albert Ravenholt Visiting Scholar. The gift from Albert Ravenholt's estate provides Grandview with resources to bring to campus scholars who will articulate the relevance of the philosophies of Danish philosopher and theologian N.S.F. Grundtvig to modern life and society. Your program gives a little bit more background on Albert Ravenholt, but perhaps most noteworthy is that while he was a foreign correspondent, Albert also was a visiting scholar on numerous college and university campuses. The Ravenholt family, members of the Ravenholt family, are viewing online and will have an opportunity to view the recording of today's presentation. Our speaker this morning certainly embodies one of the aims of Global Vision Week and our mission to serve the public good. She brings to us an understanding that will help us leverage global connectivity for the betterment of ourselves and humanity. This knowledge can help us discover meaningful ways to contribute to our dynamic democratic society. Ms. Washington has a distinguished career that includes educating her audiences on the practical applications of social media networks like Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube for everyday people and small business owners. A graduate of the University of Houston, Crystal has shared her expertise globally throughout North America and in the Caribbean, Africa, and Europe. She is the owner of CWM Enterprises and the co-founder of Social Tunities, a social media instructional brand name aimed at training everyone in strategically using social media. Her career includes books, countless speeches, and other advocacy work. Indeed, we are privileged to have such a distinguished guest here to keynote this year's Global Vision Week. Join me in welcoming Ms. Crystal Washington.
Okay. All right. Hello for real this time. Okay. So I have to start off by saying how honored I am to be here with all of you, especially all the student faces that I'm seeing, but also a lot of the educators as well. You know, I wanted to start off when I first spoke to Dr. Heather and Dr. Wilson about what they wanted you all to take away from this. They talked about how we're really moving into this global society. And it's funny, we started having these conversations before COVID, before we really had a strong understanding of just how interconnected we really are. How many of us in this room, if someone had come to us in 2019 and said, hey, I'm from the future, guess what 2020 and 2021 are going to look like? How many of us would have believed what they had to say? First off, I'll be honest, I wouldn't have believed them first off because they said they were from the future, and that kind of goes against what I believe at this point in time. But on top of that, the world has shifted in some pretty dramatic ways, and we're seeing how things that happen in one country can very easily impact another and vice versa. And we're seeing how travel was impacted. And so what's happening is that for the students in this room right now and those that are joining us via live stream, you're graduating into a world that has never existed before in this way. Globalization was already expanding, but due to COVID, it's expanding in brand new and exciting ways. One of which is that we're starting to see more and more emphasis on remote work. How many of us have heard teachers and news talk about remote work, yes? So what's happening now, so I think it's important for us to zoom in on this before we get to the presentation itself, is that we're starting to see companies that before required certain positions to be in person now start to reach out beyond different cities and even countries. It's producing some interesting impact because some companies are trying to figure out how do we tax our base if they do this. But what this means for you is that now you have opportunities to work with organizations that in the past you couldn't have even gone to because you weren't located in the proper city. And so your opportunities are opening up all around you. And that's the world we live in. Now, I'll share with you, one of the things that I was also asked to do was to share a little bit of my personal story. And I'll say this to you, this is not something that I normally do. I normally speak to corporate and association audiences, so I'm always talking about tactical things, not my story. But where this comes into play, and I think about where there might be some intersection between our stories is that when I graduated from college, graduated at the top of my class, I worked hard, and I was of the belief that if you work really hard, you get good results, right? I think that's pretty much what most of us have been brought to believe. And I did, with the exception of the fact that I ended up working for an organization that wasn't especially culturally competent. And so there were a lot of little challenges that happened along the way there. Even though my performance was amazing, in the end, I decided to part. They asked me to stay. I decided to part because I wanted what I thought would be a more healthy environment. But here's where things get interesting, and this is where this intersection comes into play. I'm a millennial. Now, I'm an old millennial, but I'm still a millennial, okay? And so I was just the beginning of the group of people that they kind of branded as loving avocado toast and doing whatever they want to do. I know you in this room, you're Gen Zs. You get a lot more respect than we did, so congratulations to you, okay? But, you know, here I was working for a corporation and making good money for my age. I was even overseeing a department of people that honestly in age could have been my parents and grandparents. Have any of you in this room, and it could be for work, it could be for community service that you've done, has anyone in here ever had to manage people that were considerably older than you? Has anyone had that experience? It's fun, isn't it? And so I remember in corporate America, I wouldn't even tell them my real age because I knew that my employees would have eaten me for lunch, right, if they actually knew I was in my early 20s. But with all the things that were going on in that environment, there was something that was eating at me. There was this thing called social media. Now, at the time, it was just at its infancy. I'm going back MySpace days. Did anybody in here have a MySpace account? Some of you should not have had a MySpace account in this room, but you had one anyways, okay? Your parents weren't paying attention. You got on MySpace. But this was back in MySpace days, okay? And I remember going to my boss in that interesting environment that I lived in, because I had a sales and marketing position. And I said, hey, I have a feeling that this social media thing is going to be big, which now, duh, right? But at the time, I said, you know, I have a feeling that one day companies and organizations are going to start to communicate with their customers, with their target market. They'll open up accounts and they can have conversations. And so for the first time in history, we're going to see organizations develop relationships and have conversations with individuals. Now, this is the world you were born into for the most part, but that wasn't a thing when I said this. And my boss, this lovely baby boomer man, looked at me and he said, look, kid, you're cute and you make us a bleep load of money. And he didn't say bleep. He said, stick to what you know. And I said, oh, because I just knew if our company used it, it would be helpful. And so I did what any millennial would do, because remember, we don't get the respect that you all do. I was a kooky one. I quit my job to start a digital marketing firm. And this is something that my parents' generation didn't have the opportunity to have remote work and do things online and build their own way and lane. And since that time, that one move has taken me all over the world to speak to people of many different cultures, okay? And so I started off telling you a little bit of my story so you can see my perspective, but by the time we're done today, we're actually going to end with your individual stories. Because at the end of the day, the goal is for you to leave understanding how you can take advantage of this new world, probably in some ways that maybe you haven't thought of before. At the end of the day, I want to give you what you need to be successful, whether you decide to go with a traditional career track or whether you decide to go in another direction, or maybe both, because we live in a world now where people are able to have one career and even side businesses or side jobs themselves, okay? Now, this is going to be interactive in the sense that if you have a question, raise your hand. I'm going to take them as we go along. If you're joining us via live stream, go ahead, type your question into YouTube, and I will pause at certain points in the conversation and answer your question as well. At the end of the day, I want you to leave with what you need. Can we all agree that if we have any questions, we'll ask those? Yes? Okay. So what I want to do is kind of open up talking about the fact that it was already introduced that we're going to talk about this in 3 different sections today. This global identity and how to take advantage of this new world. Number 1, we're going to take a look at how all this technology is changing us as humans. The reason it's important for us to understand why and how it's changing us is because it influences how we interact with other people, and it influences how we look at our own opportunities and ourselves in this new world. After that, we're going to look at how social media specifically is shifting cultures and cultural interactions. But last, and I think the most important part, is we're going to talk about what unique opportunities you have in this new environment. So let's start off by talking about how technology is changing humans. Now, what's happening is, number one, we're becoming more attached to our technology than ever before. So out of curiosity, how many of us in this room think we might be addicted to our smartphones? Does anyone in here think we might be addicted? Not us, a friend, right? Do we know people or any? How many of us in this room think we are addicted to our smartphones? Okay? All right, so I saw most people in here raise their hand. There are a couple of you in the room that were like, I don't know, Crystal, maybe, maybe not. If you're unsure, I'm going to ask you a question, and your answer to this question will help you deduce once and for all if you're addicted to your smartphone. Are you ready for the question? Yes? Yes? I promise you can make noise. All right. Here's the question. Raise your hand if you sleep with your smartphone. So what's interesting is I looked around the room, I'd say about 95% of you said yes, and then 5% of you look like yes, kind of. And what's happening is people are trying to evaluate what I mean by sleeping with your phone. And one of the things I like to jokingly say is that if a human slept with a beer every single day, on the side of or on their nightstand every day, you have a problem, okay? So we're addicted to these devices, but it's not for no reason. It's not because, I know sometimes elders say things like these young people are too attached to their devices. Has anyone heard that before? And it's not just young people, by the way. Whenever they say that, it's hilarious because it's always the people that have like multiple devices on them making the judgment. We're attached to these devices because, number one, we're developing something called digital amnesia. Digital amnesia simply means that we retain less information in here because we have devices to hold information for us. So for instance, the people in this room that are older millennials like myself and up, you remember a time where you actually memorized a lot of your contacts' phone numbers, right? So if you think about 20 years ago, those people in this room that fit the millennials or up, there was a time 20 years ago where you probably had 10 to 20 people's phone numbers memorized. Now we don't do that anymore. How many of you in here have at least 10 phone numbers memorized? Okay, great. So that's like 10 of us in this whole room, right? Most of us don't because we don't have to. We have these devices. What happens is it's also shifted how we learn. I remember a few years ago being contacted by an oil and gas organization, and they needed an after-dinner speaker in Houston. They decided 2 weeks out that they were going to add this speaker, so they simply Googled Houston social media speaker, and they hired me to bring me in. But during the day, I was the after-dinner speaker. During the day, I was still plugged in on Twitter because at the time, this is the height of the Twitter craze where everybody was tweeting at conferences, right? And I was just curious to see what they were saying. So I was following their hashtag throughout the day, and I was even commenting here and there with some of the attendees that were at the event. So then when I got there for my after-dinner session, I did my session on social media, and afterwards, there was a woman in the audience when I asked for questions, and she had her hands like this, and she had a little smirk on her face, and she raised her hand like this, which should already tell you she was going to say something crazy, right? We already know the body language, what's coming next. And she said, well, all this social media and technology stuff is all well and good, but what about the fact that these young people, they don't even know how to pay attention anymore? Like this woman next to me right here, she's been playing on her tablet the whole time. She's not even listening to you. And I was like, wow. And it was hilarious because the young woman who's sitting next to her, she looked up like, I know you didn't, right? But what was funny is she had her tablet, and right then, she just turned it around towards me. She was the main person tweeting the main points from the event as notes so that people back in her office that weren't there would still see the highlights. Now, it wasn't my job to make the crotchety lady feel bad, right? And so I just said, well, this just kind of goes to show you that people learn in different ways now, right? And so our attachment to these devices, because we always have them, it's shifted the way that we learn. When we disagree with someone over a fact, we immediately pull out our mobile devices and get on Google or Wikipedia. Don't worry, professors, I understand. Let me say this right now. Wikipedia is not a reliable source, but we still go there for little things, right? And we immediately try to figure out which person was right using that as a source. So it's changed how we learn, but not only that, we're developing compulsory behaviors. The average Instagram user checks their account a minimum of 6 times per day. That actually increases with many TikTok users. In fact, many of us in this room right now, if you were to turn off your device for 24 hours. Now what's interesting is I didn't even finish my statement, but some of you, even though you have masks, your eyes are tightening up, like you look nervous when I said if you turn off your phone for 24 hours. If you did, you would still hear ghost notifications. This is how attached we are. And so what this means is because we're attached, because we have these compulsory behaviors, we're even having to create laws to protect ourselves from these devices. There's, in Honolulu, they enacted a law a couple years ago where it's now illegal to go through an intersection looking at your mobile device because people are getting hit by cars there. Have any of you in here seen those old Hanna-Barbera cartoons like the Flintstones? Has anyone seen those cartoons before? Remember how when they get scared, like Fred, he'd jump up in the air and his little feet would do this? Do y'all remember that? So what's interesting is that you can go to YouTube and find this right now, okay? It's still there. A few years ago, there was a gentleman in California, I believe he was actually in Los Angeles. He's walking down the street. He was so engrossed in his device that he didn't notice that a wild bear had wandered out in front of him. Yes, ma'am, your eyes are huge. It was a wild bear, yes. And so it wasn't until he was about maybe 6 feet away from that bear that he looked up and saw the bear. And a traffic cam caught this. And I lie to you not, you can find this video yourself. He jumped up in the air and his little feet did this. I didn't even know real humans could do this. This is how attached we are to our devices. And because of this new attachment, because we sleep with them, because we take them everywhere, because we use them for our GPS to store all our memories, to do our banking, to enroll in courses, all kinds of things, we are now becoming the cyborgs that 1980s movies talked about. Now, a cyborg is someone, a human who is fitted with technology. I want to be very clear. You're not androids. Androids are robots that imitate humans. That's not what we're becoming. But because we have our technology so much, we're being fitted with it, and it's shifting how we interact with the world because now we have the ability to reach much further than we used to. A great example of this is apps. When you think about apps, actually out of curiosity, I said this was interactive. Does anybody mind raising their hand and telling me what their favorite apps are? Just kind of curious. What apps do you use on a regular basis? Yes, sir. Instagram. Yes. Any other apps? Target. What do we have? Target. Or like I like to say, Target. Yes. Yes, ma'am. Twitter. Yes. What other apps do we have? Yes, ma'am. Snapchat. Yes. Anybody else? Any apps that we use for efficiency to get things done? Yes, sir. YouTube. How many of you know whatever it is you want to learn how to do, there's a British guy on YouTube who's already created a video to teach you how to do it. I don't know if it's the same British guy or if it's a pastime over there, but I love it because their accents are so melodious. Anybody else have a different app that they use that just makes life easier or better? Anybody else in here? Yes, ma'am. Your calendar. iCal. Yes, yes, yes. Yes, sir. Google, oh man, I would not have made it here without Google Maps. I am a professional get-loster, okay? Like, if you all had seen me before smartphones, And I said I'm a millennial, but I'm an old millennial. So there was still a time where I was running around driving without GPS, right? It was sad. The only thing that saved me is the fact that I know astronomy. I lie to you not. You'd be shocked how many times I found my way home by looking at the position of the sun and stars. Thank goodness for Google Maps. Yes, we had another one over here. Yes. Spotify, yes. There are apps for literally everything now. We have Uber and we have Lyft. We have things like Dog Vacay, which is Airbnb for your doggies if you ever want to just put your dogs up somewhere. We have Turo. Has anyone in here ever used Turo? Does anyone in here know what Turo is? If you've ever wanted to just steal someone else's car, it's better because you're not actually stealing it, you're just borrowing their car. But it's like Airbnb, you show up and get someone's car and go. There's apps for getting food delivered to your home. There's apps for your groceries. There's apps for getting food with recipes delivered. There's apps for everything, and so we're more dependent than ever before. That is why one of the things that propelled the growth of social media. Social media and smartphones have a symbiotic relationship. And so what happened was, as social networks started to expand in their abilities, smartphones had to keep up with the technology and expand with what they could do. But at the same time, as their capacity grew, so did social media companies need to take advantage of additional features. Does that make sense to everybody in here? So they're kind of these living, breathing organisms that work off of each other. So now that we understand our connection to technology and the fact that many of us in here are probably addicted to our smartphones, now let's take a moment to look at how social media is shifting cultures. Because with us always having these devices, we're now not just connected to those, but we're literally connected to the entire world. Right now, if there's a natural disaster halfway around the globe, within minutes, you and I can send aid to them. This is powerful because no matter what age you are, that means that you have the real ability to impact other people. I have seen 10-year-olds raise tens of thousands of dollars for people across the globe that went through different natural disasters. That's powerful. I'm from Houston, Texas. I can't even tell you what that technology meant to us during Hurricane Harvey, when people that I knew were stranded on their roofs, and there's no way you can get to them except, actually it was a college student who built an app on the spot within an hour or two to connect people that needed help with the Cajun Navy. Has anyone heard of the Cajun Navy before? Has anyone not heard? Because if so, I'll explain what it is. The Cajun Navy is just basically a group of people from Louisiana. Okay, and I'm going to say this because my husband's family are from Louisiana, and a few generations back, mine is too. These are some of the most country folks you will ever meet. And I say this as a Texan, so that should tell you something, right? And they just have all different types of boats, whatever kind of boats they have. Some of them is the kind of boats that they do for alligator hunting and everything. And they would tow them into Houston as far as they could get in when they hit the water, and they just go around rescuing Houstonians. Powerful. And so there was a college student that wasn't any particularly well-known college student at their university or anything, but they just took it upon themselves saying, hey, it's a problem. I wonder if I can just create some type of app where people could use SMS text messaging, and it goes in and tells the Cajun Navy where they need to rescue people. That's the power of your voice that you have now with social media and with technology, because it was also feeding off of Facebook as well. So let's talk about how social media is shifting cultures. One of the first ways it's changing actual culture is that we're now more interconnected than ever before. Now, you all, the students in the room, you were kids when this happened, but how many of you in here remember Arab Spring, when we started to see a lot of the countries in the Middle East, especially like Egypt, Tunisia, when they started raising up against their government, right? And it was a bloody mess. For the students in here that don't remember this wasn't that long ago, but you were still younger. So it was a hot mess. The governments were turning off the internet, thinking that they could stop their people from using Facebook and Twitter to organize. What they didn't know was that at the time, and until very, very recently, like in the last 2 years, you could actually still use SMS text messaging without internet to get messages up on Facebook and Twitter. So they didn't even have a fundamental understanding of how the networks work. And so they would use social media to organize to overthrow their governments. But I'll tell you where things got interesting for me. Around the time that this was going on, Wisconsin union workers were fighting with their governors, okay, as they were negotiating. I don't know how many of you remember this, okay? And what was happening is they were sleeping in at the governor's office, they were getting arrested, they were getting beat. It was a hot mess, but it was all over jobs. Much of the unrest in Egypt was over jobs. So keep that in mind, that they were saying that the government was not providing them with opportunities. So I was preparing for a speaking engagement, and I remember it was a particularly cold day in San Francisco. And I go on Facebook, and I see a picture that pierced my heart, and still to this day, it gives me chills. Here it was, a picture of people during the Arab Spring in Egypt protesting, as they had been. There's tons of pictures of them holding up signs, in Arabic, basically protesting what was going on. But there was this one sign that said, "Egypt stands with Wisconsin workers." And it blew my mind that here you have these people that are starving and fighting for their lives and being killed by their own government, identifying with union workers in Wisconsin in the United States. And we've seen more of that over the last few years, where we're seeing people connect across these borders. And so now we have an interconnectedness that allows us to connect causes. Oftentimes that's helpful. Occasionally it's not. Because I know that many of you are taking courses in regards to cultural competency and racial issues and things, and one of the more fascinating things that you learn, the more that you study and travel, is that while it is certainly helpful to be able to identify with people of other cultures, we also have to be careful that we're not projecting our perspective onto them. How many of us have dealt with that before? So for instance, some of the issues we have here, I'll give you an example. And I'll use a personal example. As an African American, I have known fellow African Americans that project American racism into what they see in other countries, where maybe the issue isn't race, it might actually be tribe or culture. Does that make sense to everybody in here? And so this interconnectedness has created this very interesting space where we can now see people from another culture and immediately identify. That's one way. The second way that social media is shifting culture is that now we're able to create our groups internationally. Now, I don't like using these terms, but I'm going to use them because they probably are the best to illustrate this. Business has basically leveraged terms that I think are a little inappropriate, but they talk about someone's tribe or someone's clan. Have we heard that, where groups say that? And so for the sake of just illustrating a point, I'll use them, but typically I don't like to use them in a business perspective. But now we have the ability to build our tribes across cultural boundaries. Right now, you can join all kinds of groups on different social networks, and you can actually have a group of friends from all over the world. Now again, for many of us in this room, that's normal, okay, because you were born into that. But I want you to understand it's still a shift, and we're still figuring this out, because it's still relatively new in the history of humanity. Prior to that, the Gen X's, the young Gen X's in the room, and me being an old millennial, we had something called chat rooms. I'm curious though, for those in the room that didn't have chat rooms, or maybe when you were in college it was before chat rooms, how did you connect with people from other countries? Anybody mind sharing? If you're building relationships with someone in another country, what did you have? Anybody? Pen pal, yes. Yes. I actually had one named Maria in Spain, as a little kid. That's what we had. If we were lucky, we had 1 or 2, 3 other people in another country, someone signed us up for a service, and we're communicating back and forth. Now you have the ability to speak to people all over the world. Speaking back to that Arab Spring and developing your culture or your tribe internationally, I remember when the Arab Spring was happening, specifically those things were happening in Egypt, people are watching the news to see what's happening. Now, how many of us in here know that the news, no matter which station you look at, it can be skewed at times? How many of us know this, right? It has nothing to do with our beliefs or where we want to stand. They're all telling a story. I've done enough news segments around the globe to tell you they all have a story they're trying to tell. It's impossible for you to tell a story without having an agenda in the news, okay? And so it was so fascinating watching what the news was saying versus talking to my friends who lived in Egypt. And one friend in particular, She would check in with me, and she was telling me how people in her neighborhood were disappearing. The government was literally showing up and snatching up people. And this was an American that had moved there, so she's totally mind blown because she'd never seen anything like it. And not even just, it's not like whole families that ran away. No, one person in the family just didn't come back one day. And then another person, another family. And so it's connected us so that we see people in other ways. Now, one of the other ways that social media is shifting culture is that now we're starting to see cultures merge faster. Have any of you, well, let me ask you this first, okay? We kind of mentioned some of our favorite apps. How many of you in here, your favorite social network is Instagram? Whose is Instagram? Raise your hand, okay? How many Snapchat? A few. How many TikTok? Okay. What are our other, how many YouTube? What are our other favorite social networks? I didn't mention your social network. What's your favorite social network? Raise your hand if we didn't talk about it. Yes, sir. Twitter. I love it. That's so great for news. Anybody else have a different one? WhatsApp. Okay, yes. Who had a different one? Facebook. That was a very non-student answer right there. I see. Just out of curiosity, how many of us in here, Facebook is our favorite? Okay. Oh, I'm okay. All right, I see us. Okay. Did you have a different one, sir? LinkedIn. Oh, we're going to get to you later. Okay, on the last part, we're all over that, buddy. You're already ahead of the game. Okay? So what's happening is when we get on these different social networks, have you started to notice that new slang is being used in other countries, like things we're using here, it's being used in other countries? Have you seen that? Or are you starting to see this merging of cultures where you're starting to see almost, I'll see a trend that's coming out of, let's say, South Korea, okay? Because they actually have some really interesting fashion trends. I went there right before COVID hit, and I'll start to see a merging of what's happening there with some of the trends in South Africa. And so what's happening is we're having this kind of blurring of lines. I have friends in Ghana. I have one friend in Ghana who's a doctor, and we're about the same age. And it's hilarious when I'll see him use relatively new American slang, but not quite in the right way. Do you know what I mean? Have you seen that happen with folks? Some of you in this room have seen it happen with us older people, right? But I mean across cultures. And so we're starting to see this very quick moving around of cultural elements. It also gives us the opportunity to learn from each other, but it's not a given, because some people think that just because social media exists, it means that if we're on it, we're learning from other cultures. It is a choice. So that's not always what's necessarily true. But understand this. The power of what social media is doing to culture is that it's all giving us a common undercurrent of culture. Out of curiosity, is anyone in here on Clubhouse? I'm just curious to know, is anybody in here on Clubhouse? Okay. That's interesting. Has anyone in here never heard of Clubhouse before? Raise your hand if you've like what is Clubhouse? Awesome. Okay, so Clubhouse is the first of its kind audio-only social network. And it actually came out during the midst of the pandemic. And it was such a fascinating place because it was invite-only, only available with people with iOS, okay? So it wasn't available to the Android folks. And it started off with only being like the cool kids in Silicon Valley, okay? So it was all of these people that were launching these huge companies or these tech millionaires. And then it was fascinating because I guess they got together, and it was a very small group at first. Like I said, it was invite only. And here's a question. Has anyone in here ever gone to a party before and someone at the party is nuts that you don't know? Has that ever happened where you see somebody and what do you always ask? Who brought this person? Or my friends were like, whose dude is this? You know, I'm like, who did this? So the interesting about Clubhouse is invite only. And there's no text in the sense where you can like text and message people. But the one thing on your profile is it shows who brought you in. So it kept it exclusive because everybody's responsible for the person they brought in, because if someone showed up in a room and started talking or saying something crazy, people were like, whose man is this? Oh, this person, right? So now you kind of have that pressure. Well, apparently they got together at one point, and I mean, they had some really high-level, amazing conversations. I mean, these were some movers and shakers, and they said, you know what, we don't have enough diversity. Who do we bring in? So if you're a whole bunch of California tech people and you want some diversity, who do you bring in? They made one of the strangest choices I've ever seen. They went straight to Atlanta and brought in a bunch of rappers. And so then Clubhouse became this really strange place of like these tech people and these like Atlanta rappers and that culture. But it fostered some of the most amazing conversations there. And only recently, in the last few months, did it start opening up to other countries. And so here's where the power is. And I think, you know, it's one of those things where you kind of have to get through the trash, like any social network. You have to kind of choose, because people go to different rooms, and each room has a topic. So it's almost like this environment where you can go into one classroom, another classroom, you choose where you want to go. But from a cultural standpoint, I have found this to be one of the most fascinating social networks, because now we have a window into other people's thinking in a new way. So I'll give an example. I remember one of the more fascinating rooms that I was in was a group for people in Nigeria where they were talking about colorism within the Igbo community. And so here I am, a fly on the wall, listening to this conversation. I have nothing to contribute. I know that my voice is not needed or warranted in that space. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? Where sometimes you come in and it's interesting, but it's not really your place to speak. I've seen rooms where they happen to speak in English, but it's all people from Japan at times. Sometimes they speak in Japanese too, and they'll talk about their issues. I was in a room once where people from China were talking about their perspective on their issues with America and how our media is misportraying them, and learned some really fascinating things, because these were everyday people, and some of them were business people. And so it's allowing us to understand people beyond the normal media networks we used to have. This is what you have access to. You can hear things straight from the horse's mouth. You can learn directly from people. You can hear what issues they have. But here's where it becomes powerful in two ways. Number one, it allows you to become a better advocate. And what I mean by that is when you hear people have these conversations, it gives you perspective. I was very blessed in that growing up, I went to one of the most diverse, actually at the time it was the most diverse high school in the United States of America. And so I grew up with friends of all different races. I went to their houses, I had their food, I heard their conversations. I learned that there were some things I was allowed to do that my friends were not allowed to do. I learned that there were things that they were allowed to do that would never have gone over in my house, right? And so what happens is now, when I hear people throw out stereotypes about some of these people that I grew up with, I can be a better advocate because I know what their experience is, not firsthand, but from being around in an intimate space. So that's number one. But your number two thing that you gain from this is that now if you have the desire to leverage this information for opportunities for yourself across cultures, it's going to make you more intentional in how you interact with other cultures. Does that make sense to everybody in here? So now it's not just about applying for a job with another country or with a company that's based in another country. Now you have the opportunity to pick up some of these little idiosyncrasies. You can hear exactly what they're talking about in their own networks, and you can make sure that when you show up, you're showing up completely, well, not completely, as competent as possible in those interactions. So the last thing we're going to talk about of those three is what opportunities lie for you in this new global environment where we're more connected than ever before. We have these devices, and people all over the world are just as connected. You know, I remember maybe around 2010, when I was speaking in Accra, Ghana. It was such an interesting experience to me, because when I got there, their internet infrastructure was not amazing. And the average person there did not have laptops like most Americans did at the time. But what they did have were smartphones. And they used apps before we really used apps. Like, they had things that, before there really were apps, they had kind of gamed their phones to create them, because mobile technology was what was highly used in Africa and places like India and more developing areas of the world, right? But in Ghana specifically, it blew my mind to see people that were living in what we would probably consider shacks, right? But it was just, you know, normal for them in certain areas, because they have some very wealthy areas as well. But everybody comes out, they might have the shack, they might have the chickens, and then they have the mobile phone in their hand. And it blew me away. What was even more fascinating is, and tell me, I don't know if any of you have traveled internationally and seen this in some developing countries. It wasn't just that, but you would see some of the mobile phone companies painting their logo on the side of the homes. Has anyone ever seen that before? Yeah. So basically they're giving them service, and or sometimes they're just saying, well, your house, it's looking a little shabby. I'll tell you what, I'll paint it and I'll put the, not Motorola, but whatever companies they're using on the side, and we'll give you a little bit of free service or something too. And so this shift is happening where people are more connected than ever before, and now we have the opportunity to connect with them on their level. So now let's get to how this impacts you. People are not just watching us locally. Have you ever had the experience of just being yourself, living life, and then finding out that maybe someone has taken a liking, maybe a professor, maybe a professional has given you a job for a reason you never even thought of? Has that ever happened to you before? I'll give you an example. When I was in high school, I was very blessed that I got a lot of scholarships for college. But I remember one teacher who was really pushing me, and every scholarship she heard of, she immediately ran to me and said, hey, Crystal, get this. She gave me a copy of one of the letters she wrote along with my application. And it started off like I would have expected. She gave me a copy for my own use. She's like, well, this one's for you. You can open it, just see what I'm saying about you. This is the one that's sealed. You may law. And so I read how she talked about, my good grades and this and that, and, I'm punctual, that's great. But here's where things get really weird. She said, and she's so professional, even in high school. I've never seen her wear a pair of jeans to class. And it was the weirdest thing to me because I didn't call myself being professional. Jeans just weren't my jam at the time, right? She'd have to catch me later in life. My point is that right now, there are always people who are watching us and observing us, and we don't even know what it is they're seeing or what's drawing them to us. And so this is your opportunity to be intentional because most of your peers are not. And so this is your opportunity to have a competitive advantage. And so one of the first ways that we can benefit from this shift is creating a personal brand that adds value. Now, I'm fairly certain that most of us in this room have heard of a personal brand, and usually when people talk about it, they kind of mean it in a superficial way. Do you know what I mean by that? You think about people on Instagram with the ducky lips, the lip gloss, and trying to look a certain way. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm saying is the same thing that my teacher was doing to me then, the world is doing to you now. I personally know high school students who have gotten opportunities, and they don't even know this is the reason why. Because someone who was over a scholarship committee or someone who was hiring for an intern happened to do a Google search and saw a positive article about them in something that they participated in. Please understand that now the world is much bigger. There are a lot of people looking at you. I mentioned speaking in Accra, Ghana. Do you know how I got that job? Someone in Accra, Ghana saw one of my YouTube videos and said, oh, we need her. And this was years ago, so I was real green. And I remember when they reached out to me, and they're like, oh, we would love to have you speak at our event. Now, I'm not trying to be ugly, but I think we've all seen enough internet scams for me, so you can understand why I was like, oh, and where do I send the prince money? I didn't say this, but this is what I was thinking, right? It ended up being legitimate. I remember my first event that I did in Dusseldorf, Germany. It was literally because someone found me online. People are looking for you right now. This happens to students all the time. So the question then becomes, what you've put online thus far, is it intentional? So this isn't me lecturing you on what you should do or, slapping your hand. It's literally me saying, you have the opportunity to shape how people see you from the beginning. So I want to ask you a question. Who in here knows who Lady Gaga is? Okay, just give you an example, okay? Now, I once did a poll of high school students through several different classes, and I asked them if they shared one adjective. When they think of Lady Gaga, what one adjective would that be? And over 70% of the students said something along the lines of unique, weird, strange, marches to her own drum because somebody didn't follow directions and come up with a single word adjective. That always happens. But no matter what, if you think about it, if I said over 70%, I think the actual number is like 72% of the students answered in that way, aren't all of those terms synonymous for unique? It just matters if you like her or not. You might say weird, you might say, unique, but they all mean the same thing. That's branding. When people see her, most people have the same thought. What word, or let's give you even 2 to 3 words, do you want to own in the mind of people that interact with you, especially as you go forward in your careers? It might have to do with your career. It might have to do with a business you're thinking about opening. But when they see you, what word do you want to call to mind? Now, she embodies her word because she's always doing something different. I remember years ago when she showed up in a meat suit, I was like, that is unique. If nothing else, that's different. What word do you want to own? So what I want to do is ask you, turn to the person next to you. I'm going to give you just 2 minutes. And I want you to brainstorm. I'll give you even up to 3 words if you want. What words you want to own in the mind of people when they first interact with you. And let me say something, and this is going to be based on my research over the years, okay? I'm going to encourage you, especially people in the room that identify as a woman, to not go with words like nice. And I only say that because I find that comes out more with us. Nice is a good word, but that doesn't mean that you're competent. It doesn't mean that someone wants to hire you. It doesn't show your skill level. It doesn't show what you're capable of. So nice is good. We want to be people that people want to work with. But what words do you want to own that are powerful? For a performer to be unique, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so 2 minutes, turn to someone next to you, and I want you to brainstorm, what are your 2 words? And by brainstorm, I mean you can talk. Some of you are like looking at the person next to you. You can talk to them, I promise. Don't get too close because we want to respect distancing, but go ahead and chat that out. Meanwhile, you all keep going. For our live streaming people, if you want to type your words into YouTube, go ahead and put that in. But I want you to brainstorm as well. This is extremely important to the next part of the conversation. Just 1 more minute, and if you're joining us from live stream, go ahead and keep typing in those words. I see you all are getting some of your words in too. I love it. And I'm going to come around the room in just a moment too and ask you all to share. Oh, the room got quiet. Are people scared? People are, oh no. Don't worry, it's not a critique. Okay, thank you. Okay. So let's go ahead and pause for a moment. First thing I want to do is chat with our live stream people and kind of share some of the words they came up with. And this is going to fit into the next piece of advice I give you because I'm going to leave you with some actionable things that you can do. I love to give you these concepts, but At the end of the day, we want to make sure there's things you can actually do with this information that make an impact on you in the future to make this a good use of your time, because your time is valuable. All right, so let's see what we're talking about with our live stream folks. All right, so we have driven, outspoken, reliable, natural teacher, bold, fearless, curious, dedicated, tough, straightforward, perfectionist, sociable, professional, advocate, knowledgeable, faithful, bold, trustworthy, intelligent, and professional. All right, so let's go around here. I tell you what, I don't want to just make people speak, so if you have a few words you don't mind sharing, raise your hand and I'll come to you. Because some of you, when I start walking around, I could see the fear behind your mask. So who's willing to share? Just a few words. Okay, over here. Oh, y'all are gonna make me work. Everybody on that side of the room. I see how this works. That's okay, I'm getting in my Fitbit steps. It just buzzed a moment ago and told me I had 180 steps left for the hour, so this works. Okay, go for it.
I said loving, educated, and aware.
I love it. And what do you have an idea of what you might plan on doing upon graduation?
Like career-wise?
Yeah, like career-wise. It's okay if you don't, if you're still figuring it out.
Yeah, I'm figuring out. I'm in marketing. So.
Marketing. You know what I love about the fact that you're in marketing and you said loving? Because my background is in sales and marketing, a lot of times people don't understand how important it is, the psychology behind marketing, and people feeling like you're promoting a product where you understand them or see them or care about them. So that actually makes a lot of sense for what you're planning on doing. Thank you for sharing that. I think somebody else over here? Okay, coming to you.
I said ambitious and wise.
Ambitious and wise. I love that one. So people can count on you. They can come to you in the workplace, right? Or for your business. And ambitious means you're constantly striving. Do you know what you might be interested in doing? Again, it's okay if you don't. Finance. Ooh, that's a good one. I love it. Okay, anybody else? Of course, across the room. Okay. That's okay. Fitbit loves you. I'm coming. Okay, what do we have?
Oh yeah, for me I said adaptable and critical thinker.
Adaptable and critical thinking. Yes, and what do you think you might be interested in doing?
I'm doing MIS, which stands for Management Information System.
Management Information Systems and adaptable, AKA agile, is powerful. You just chose some great words. Thank you. All right, anybody else? I'm not gonna get you. You were stretching, but I was so tempted. I'm not gonna do you like that though. Over here, okay. He's like, me? Yes, you stretched at the wrong time. I got you. Okay, my fellow Facebook friend, what do we have?
Capable and sociable.
Capable and sociable. I love it. Did you have another one too? Anybody else? Where? Oh, okay.
Altruistic and passionate.
Altruistic and passionate. These are really good words. Any other ones? So here's what I would suggest that you do. Thank you so much. First off, everybody give yourselves a round of applause and all the people that were willing to share. So what I love about the words that you all chose, especially those of you who I got to know what you're interested in doing upon graduation, is that you picked words that were appropriate for where you're trying to go. And that does matter. There's different characteristics that you look for in different careers. Now, here's my question. Think about those words that you wrote down. And now I want you to think about whatever your social media presence might be, or even if you don't have a presence yet, we'll put that on the back burner, because I know some of you might not even be publicly accessible. But if people can see you online, what they see, does it embody those words? Everything you think, say, and do online should embody those words, because that's a part of your brand. And so start thinking about if someone were to happen upon your information and they were to have your dream opportunity, and a dream opportunity might be a job, it might be an investment in a company that you're starting, it might be an opportunity with a nonprofit that just really feeds your soul. Do you look like the person that they'd want to bring in? You'd be surprised. We live in a world where people will create opportunities for people that they identify with. So, sir, you mentioned your favorite social network was LinkedIn, right? How many of you on here have a LinkedIn presence? How many of you on here are confident in your LinkedIn presence? It's okay if you're not. How many of you are confident? You're like, man, I'm getting it. If you're not, let me give you a few things that you can do, because I think LinkedIn is probably one of the best social networks when it comes to building this brand, because even though LinkedIn is an American social network, it is used internationally widely. There's really only one competitor that's really a competitor. It's based out of Germany, and its following is so small we don't need to discuss it. Now, if you plan on working in Germany, then go ahead and shoot me an email at Crystal Washington. I'll tell you about it later. I can get you the information. But for everybody else, LinkedIn is one of the best social networks also because it runs off of keywords. Raise your hand if you know what a keyword is. Okay? If you do not, keywords are words or terms that you want to be found for online. So to give you an example, my keywords are not social media. If someone types in social media on Google, what are the chances they need a miniature black lady to show up and talk about technology? Not high. But if someone types in social media speaker, I'm your girl, right? So think about those words you want to be found for. Now, LinkedIn, like websites, runs on keywords, which means that you can't be found for any words or terms that are not included in your LinkedIn profile. So start to think about the opportunities you want. Start to think about the job opportunities you want to be considered for, and find a way to work those terms into your LinkedIn profile. Do you get where I'm going with this? So that way when people search for it, even if you haven't worked in it yet, looking for a future opportunity in 2023 where I will have the opportunity to get those words in there so you pop up more in search. Not only will you pop up within LinkedIn, but Google as well. Google loves LinkedIn. I want you to take the opportunity to look at your picture. Does your picture showcase your brand, those words that you just talked about? Make sure that it does. There's no one way to look professional anymore, but you do need to look on brand for whatever industry you're going into. So for instance, the gentleman in here that's interested in going into, was it finance, sir? Your profile picture should probably look different from the person in here who's passionate and is interested in going into marketing. Think about your brand and who you're trying to attract. So that's your number one. I want you to go into LinkedIn, update your picture, get your keywords in there so that you're more likely to be found by people looking for your skill set or looking for people who are interested in the areas you're interested in going into upon graduation. Get your charity work in there, all that wonderful community service that you've done, put that in there. It builds you up as a well-rounded person. They see your passion. Next up, how many of you use YouTube? What do you use it for? Anybody? Watching video games. Do you like to watch people play video games? Yeah. It's hilarious. My husband does that too. I don't get it, I don't judge it, but I'm like, man, okay, cool. But yeah, all the time. Do you learn stuff from it? Like, do you learn like moves?
I learned like for attack strategies on games.
Okay, so he's learning attack strategies through YouTube. That's what I'm talking about. What do you use it for, sir?
Like book reviews, movie reviews, stuff like that.
So when you say book reviews, do you mean reading them or giving them?
Like giving them.
Okay, so when you're doing a book review, you're creating a video for YouTube?
Oh, you mean like me giving them? No, like
Yeah. So it's like you're using it like Cliff Notes, if you will, just to kind of get a review on the book. I get it. Okay. Anybody use it for something different? These are all good uses. Anybody use it for something different? Yes, sir. Your business. What's your business? You're a photographer. And so do you put up some of your videos and photos on YouTube to showcase your work? So I love it. Whether you have a business or not, one of the best things you can use YouTube for is for a video resume. Here's what you have to understand about YouTube. YouTube is technically, while it's a social network, it's the second largest search engine, and it's owned by the largest search engine, which is Google. Do people give preferential treatment to their children? Yes, and so does Google. And so it's about 50 times easier to get a video to land on the first or second page for keywords than it is any type of written text. And so if you have some type of visual resume representation, sharing what you're interested in doing, what your passions are, what kind of projects you're interested in. If you have a side business that you've launched, use YouTube. But here's the kicker. It's not enough to just have a good video. And good video isn't hard to do. I mean, right now, we all have these. These are more powerful than the professional movie cameras that they had in the late 1980s, okay? So this is how powerful your phone is. It's more powerful than what they used to make Terminator. You can find little microphones for less than $20 on Amazon. You can get the light for less than $20 on Amazon. So you can create a nice, good quality video. But here's the kicker. Make sure that you're using keywords in the title and the description. Does that make sense to everybody in here? And if you're trying to connect with a particular different culture or country, maybe you're looking for opportunities with another country or in collaboration or maybe some type of business interest leveraging cross-border communications, put that in there so that they're more likely to find you. Does that make sense to everybody in here? When you're creating your brand, put your best foot forward. Let them see your competency about these different cultures, if that's part of what you're doing. But this is your opportunity to create your own opportunity. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it wasn't possible to be found by your dream job in this way. But I think you would be shocked how many people get opportunities because they're simply in the right place in the right time in an internet search. If there's a particular company or organization that you want to catch the attention of, put them in the keywords. And in the verbiage, mention how, I've been a fan of this company, I'm watching them do this, I'm following this, so that they're more likely, their people are more likely to find you in their searches. I want you to be intentional. That's step one on how we leverage in this new cultural exchange with social media. Number two is I want you to look at joining groups that open you up to the right people. So I mentioned LinkedIn. Now, LinkedIn is not an exciting social network. Would we agree with that? Not the most exciting, okay? It definitely trends more towards baby boomers and late X's. It's not even so much my generation. It's a little bit more senior than my own. But it's amazingly valuable. You can also create videos there, by the way, just so that you know. But the other thing I want you to understand is that LinkedIn allows you to join up to 50 groups. How many of you in here have time to be active in 50 LinkedIn groups? Exactly. So y'all are probably like, Crystal must be crazy. No, I didn't ask you to be active. But you can join up to 50 groups. My suggestion would be, think about the people you need to connect with in the future. Who are those people that have these job positions, whether it's stateside or another country? What are their job titles? What kind of groups are they a part of on LinkedIn? And I want you to join those groups. Here's why. I talked about earlier being found in search on LinkedIn, remember? You pop up higher in the search results for people you share a group with. You get where I'm going with this now? So it's not about being active in them. I need you to join the groups of people that are the influencers that can help you with the next step of where you're trying to go. Your professors, your internship coordinators, your TAs, your fellow students, I need you to connect with them and keep those relationships warm. Because in the future, these relationships that you're forming right now will help you even with these future relationships. And again, keep in mind that people from all over the world are using Google and LinkedIn somewhat, but Google to find people, and LinkedIn plugs in brilliantly to Google, okay? So we talked about, number one, your own personal brand and how to highlight this in this new world where people are looking for people. Number two, we talked about you joining groups. And then lastly, I want you to be intentional with your connections now. Oftentimes on social media, we just kind of connect with people. It's a funny video. I follow this person. They make me giggle. I like this. We talked about this. I'm connecting to them. But now I want you to have laser focus. You have an opportunity that none of your parents ever had, where you can identify the people that you're going to need to leverage in the future. And don't get me wrong, it's not about using people, because we find ways to help them as well later on, right? But you have the ability to connect with them ahead of time. Was your favorite network Twitter, sir? Let me tell you why Twitter's powerful. Now, do I think it's one of the top 3 social networks you should be worried about? No. But here's where it's powerful. You have a lot of CEOs that are still on Twitter because someone told them a long time ago, you need to be on Twitter, because everybody's on Twitter. It's the best thing since sliced bread. And what happens is they're tweeting to crickets. Do you know what I mean when I say that? They're just tweeting and no one responds. If you make a habit of just, if there's key people, the CEOs of certain companies, you'd be shocked that they tweet and no one pays attention to them. If you just come in there and say, oh my gosh, this is amazing, or I found this article that talks about this a little bit more, now you're building a relationship with someone that's the head of a company. Or maybe it's a researcher in another country that you're interested in connecting with based on their topic. Most of the time, again, they're tweeting to the wind. You get on there and you connect with people and you build those relationships now so that when you need them, they're already paying attention to you. Right now, your two most valuable assets are your name/reputation, which your parents have probably told you at some point. And I don't mean this in like a purist sense. I just mean that the value of what you're known for, if you're known to be reliable, the quality of your work, that matters. But the second most valuable thing that you have is your network. Raise your hand if you've ever heard it's not who you know, or it's not what you know, it's who you know. Who's ever heard that? Okay? I personally think that's a lie. I think it's not who you know, it's who knows you. There are a lot of people in this room we know, and they don't know who we are. Does that help us any? And so be intentional starting right now. Draw your map for your future and start to think about who it is you want to connect with. You live in the most open society we have ever had in the history of the world. You have the opportunity to connect with anybody all over the world at any moment in time, and you have the ability to shape how people see you at first interaction. You have more power than anybody ever before, and now we're living in this global environment where companies and organizations from all over the world are ignoring borders to find talent and partners and people to invest in. You are powerful. Your voice is powerful. All you have to do is leverage it, okay? So, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and open this up. I think we have time for just a few questions here. So let me know if we have any questions from YouTube. Go ahead and put those in, and I'll take those over here with Dr. Heather. Are there any questions from anyone in the room right now? Any questions? So while we're coming up with questions, I believe in taking action items because your time, I mentioned earlier, your time is valuable. So for you to sit here, I believe time is money at all points in time. There's something valuable we could be doing with this moment in time. Right now, you could be learning a new skill or something else. You're here. What one thing are you going to take away and do based off what we talked about? So I'm going to point to you in a moment. What one thing are you going to do based about what we've talked about? Ma'am? Mm-hmm.
Well, like you said that people are always like watching, so I'm going to make sure that whatever they're seeing is obviously positive.
So she's going to be cognizant about anything she's putting online because people are always watching. That's a really good one. Anybody? Ma'am? In the blue, yes. I love that. She's going to update her LinkedIn profile. I think that's one of the lowest hanging fruits and easiest things we can do. Let's go with Sir in the pink. You.
Probably be more intentional on what I put out there on media.
Okay, so just being more intentional about what he's posting. Ma'am in the stripes. Yes. Change your LinkedIn profile. I love it. And then Sir with the jacket. I love it. Is this a thing here where everyone answers me? I'm being very specific in my descriptions and me. Yes, you, sir. What you got? Smart. So smart. There we go. I see. I see you. Okay. So, last opportunity. Are there any questions we need to take from YouTube? Any questions in the room? If anyone in here is shy and you have like one-on-one questions, what happens? You can just shoot me an email at crystal@crystalwashington.com. Crystal spelled like a rock crystal, crystalwashington.com. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Okay, so speak now, ask your questions, forever hold your peace. All right, thank you so much. I appreciate you, and I look forward to seeing how you shape the next few years because the future is easily in your pocket via your device. Thank you.
Well, Crystal, we've been honored to have you here as our Ravenholt visiting scholar. Very grateful for your address. Really interesting. Really appreciate the advice that you've shared. It's really for all of us. I know you probably were thinking about our students, but it's really for all of us, and I do really appreciate that. I'm also just have to say that I'm amazed when I see somebody speak without notes. Most people in this room know that that is way beyond my ability, so I appreciate that. So Crystal's keynote has gotten Global Vision Week off to a great start. There's many other worthwhile activities this week, and I want to highlight just a couple. For example, 6 o'clock this evening, you can hear stories of identity and belonging in college and in a digital world. That'll be in the Crum Centrum. Tomorrow at noon, there'll be a Lunch and Learn event in Valhalla, you know, the dining center, with some Metro business leaders to discuss how they take advantage of using a second language. And then Thursday at 11 a.m., we'll host Dr. Gurdev Kush, the 1996 World Food Prize laureate, who will deliver our World Food Prize address in a webinar format. The entire schedule for Global Vision Week is available online at grandview.edu/GVW. It takes a lot of people to make this week successful, and I appreciate everyone's efforts to do that. I want to give a special thanks to the faculty and staff who served on the Global Vision Week Planning Committee, and especially Professor Heather Brady, her great work in leading that group. Thank you again, Crystal, for your thought-provoking remarks, and thank you for sharing your time with us.